They told stories about him in whispers. Now, even centuries later, some said he was a traitor, others a savior. But all agreed on one thing. Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, El Cid, was unlike any man who had walked the blood-soaked soil of medieval Spain. And it all began not on a battlefield, but in exile. Exiled, betrayed, alone. Yet from that lowest place, he would rise to become the most feared warrior in Iberia, feared by kings, revered by armies, and remembered forever in legend. He was born in Vivar, near Burgos, around 1043, a child of a minor noble raised in the court of King Ferdinand the Great. Young Rodrigo was no ordinary boy. He wasn't just taught how to wield a sword. He studied Latin and Arabic, understood the politics of power, and listened carefully to the whispers of ambition echoing through the stone corridors of Castile. As he grew, Rodrigo was drawn to the art of war, and war, in turn, was drawn to him. Serving under Sancho II, the bold and aggressive king of Castile, Rodrigo's brilliance could not be ignored. At just 20 years old, he earned the title Campeador, champion, after a duel that changed his destiny. He became Sancho's standard-bearer, fighting not just Muslims but also Christian rivals, Alfonso of Leon, Garcia of Galicia. In the chaos of fraternal bloodshed, Rodrigo became the sword that carved a kingdom. But power never stands still. In 1072, King Sancho was assassinated. Rodrigo's patron was dead, and Sancho's brother, Alfonso VI, now ruled. The same Alfonso whom Rodrigo had once fought against. The same Alfonso who saw in Rodrigo not a hero, but a threat. In 1081, Rodrigo was exiled. Cast out of Castile, stripped of honor, and branded an outcast, Rodrigo should have faded into obscurity. But Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar did not vanish. He adapted. He crossed enemy lines, not to surrender, but to thrive. In Muslim Zaragoza, he became a mercenary, then a general. He fought under the Crescent Banner, defending his new allies from both Christian and Muslim threats. He defeated Sancho Ramirez of Aragon. His name, El Cid, became known across the peninsula. A Christian knight, leading Muslim armies, winning battles against kings. He was no longer just a servant of Castile. He was now a player in a much larger game. Then came a new enemy, the Almoravids, fierce Berber warriors from North Africa, called into Iberia by the faltering Muslim kingdoms. Their arrival changed everything. In 1086, they crushed Alfonso's forces at the Battle of Sagrayas. Christian Spain trembled. And so the king turned once again to the man he had cast aside. El Cid returned, but not as a subject. Now, he had tasted independence. He had led armies not for kings, but for himself. And he had his eyes set on something far greater than vengeance or redemption. He wanted a kingdom. He wanted Valencia. The campaign would take years, years of war, diplomacy, and siege. El Cid fought Berenguer Ramon II of Barcelona. He crushed every rival who stood between him and the jewel of the Mediterranean coast. Valencia resisted, but El Cid was patient. For 19 brutal months, he laid siege to the city. Supplies withered, walls cracked, and then it fell. In 1094, El Cid claimed Valencia, not for Castile, not for Alfonso, for himself. And here, history cracked open. A Christian warlord ruling a Muslim-majority city, with both faiths in his court and army. He forged something rare, a principality where coexistence was not just survival, it was policy. He ruled not as a vassal, but as a prince. And the world watched. But peace would not last. The Almoravids had not forgotten Valencia, and they would return to reclaim it with fury. El Cid, now in his 50s, prepared for the greatest test of his life. But death was coming, and with it, the legend. The enemy came like a storm. The Almoravids, fierce, relentless and burning with religious zeal, descended upon Valencia with fire in their hearts and conquest in their hands. But within the city wall stood a man who had never lost a battle on its soil. El Cid, the champion. Even now, older, weathered by exile, bloodied by endless war, he would not falter. In the Battle of Cort, 1094, they charged, thinking Valencia vulnerable. But El Cid had turned that city into a fortress, into a reflection of his own will. The Almoravids were defeated, crushed. It was their first major loss on Spanish soil, and it came not from a king nor a crusader, but from a man who had walked both sides of the battlefield and answered only to himself. He had carved out a realm where others had only seen ruins. But time does not obey kings or champions. In 1199, death came for Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. They say he died undefeated. They say he died standing. But the legend doesn't end there, because the man they called El Cid had become more than a general, more than a ruler. He had become a symbol, and symbols do not die. His wife, Jimena Diaz, took command. For a time, she held Valencia, preserving the dream. But the walls that had held back so many would not hold forever. In 1102, the city fell. The Almoravids reclaimed it. But they did not reclaim the story. They could not kill the myth. El Cid lived on in verse, in ink, in fire-lit tales told from court to tavern. El Cantar de mi Cid, the epic poem written just decades after his death, immortalized him, not as a mercenary, not as an exile, but as a knight of divine destiny, a husband of honor, a man who rode even in death. Yes, the story said that when he died, his body was armored, placed atop his horse, and sent into battle one last time, that the sight of him, unmoving, eternal, scattered the enemy in terror. Legend? Perhaps. But legends rise from truth. And the truth is this: Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar defied kings, crossed faiths, and ruled a city that stood between worlds. He fought Muslims, he fought Christians, he defended Zaragoza, he took Valencia, he bowed to no crown but the one he earned himself. In a time of conquest and holy war, he stood for something more dangerous: pragmatism, honor, balance. He led Christian and Muslim soldiers side by side. His court was pluralistic. His loyalty was not blind. He was a weapon honed by exile and guided by reason. And that made him terrifying to kings, to empires, to history itself. Today, his sword is preserved in a museum. His statue stands in Burgos. His name is still spoken in reverence, still wrapped in mystery. Was he a hero? A warlord? A traitor? He was all of them, and none. He was El Cid, the man who bent history to his will and rode beyond it.